All right, everyone, it's 2 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started with our next session. Now, for those of you who are starting there at 2 o'clock, welcome. My name is Mike Wright. I'm Senior Product Engineer for Issuetrak. We did a little introduction on the first session, so I didn't want to repeat it for all of those who are staying for the entire 2 hours. What I'm going to be doing on this particular webinar session is going to be going over issues and custom screens. Essentially, what I want to do is try to introduce you to what I do when I set up. When I go in here and I go ahead and set up with Issuetrak and I start trying to put in something that's brand new. Now, I'm going to go through that with you in just a minute, but let me kind of step back just a second. Today, I'm also being joined by Tony Lovelace. He's actually tracking me and keeping up with any questions. So if you have any questions that come up, please type them up in chat. He'll answer them if he can. And if not, we'll have a question and answer session at the end of this particular session. Probably going to run about 20 minutes on the session, about 10 minutes to actually answer a question. After we do that, I'm going to go right at 2:30. Hopefully, I'm going to run right into the next session. We have a section. I'm going to go ahead and kind of break for a couple minutes, so people who want to leave will be a good time for them to go, or they want to come back. Be a good time to just break for just a second. Sometimes we just need a break. Anyway, but Tony's there. He's always there to help us out. I've also got Paul Harris listening in. For those of you who've worked with Paul, he's also there listening to all of us. So I didn't want to leave them out, but I kind of wanted to go ahead and just move forward on this one. So let's talk about issues and custom screens. So the first thing is, what's the exercise for the day? Well, when I started doing these webinars, I needed a way to kind of track what I was doing. And I needed a way to share information and provide one place of truth for the information. So I wanted to track all the planning and execution functions of the webinar in one place. I want to be able to provide one place to store links to Google Docs and resources. Here at Issuetrak, we use a lot of Google Docs for sharing capabilities. So it's nice to be able to put those share links in one place for others to grab a hold to. And of course, I wanted to share information among several departments and management so that they could track what we were doing. And then I want to have a repeatable template for future webinars. I'm going to be doing these up through August, so I want a way to be able to just essentially do it the same way every time to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So, what did I start with? Well, first thing is trying to get these slides to work like I wanted to. The first thing I want to do is I want to determine within my corp site, which is what we use internally to track a lot of our issues, is did I need a new custom screen? It's just like everyone else when you're trying to put in a new usage into Issuetrak. You want to see, can I reuse what I already have? Did I need a new custom screen? Because if I did need a new custom screen, it was going to require me to have a new issue type so I could control the access to the issue and control the type of issue that was wanted to gather. And then so I had to think about what fields I needed to gather, what information I wanted. And of course, as you saw previously, I needed to put a lot of URLs in there. So I wanted to be able to track a lot of different types of data. So my answer to the first question really was, yes, I did need a new custom screen. Yes, I did need to go ahead and add additional fields. So then I had to start thinking about what kind of layout I wanted. Sometimes you'll take a back of a napkin and just rough something up, or a piece of paper and just rough it out. You know, Issuetrak's a very linear product, but you still have breaks for things like blank lines, section headers, even text on section headers. So you want to think about how that layout is going to look to your users. And then you start building a list of the things to create. I was just working with a customer previous to this, and they were doing some process issues. And they actually had policies and procedures they were building. And in the policies and procedures, we needed to create issues to support them. One of the things that we did is I went into an Excel spreadsheet, and for each policy and procedure, I created an issue type. I created the subtypes. I then thought about the user-defined fields that needed, and I put them on that spreadsheet. So when we went in and started to build, all I had to do was build. A lot of the thinking, a lot of the planning had already been done. I had already thought ahead. I knew exactly what I needed to do. So as far as Issuetrak was concerned, boom, go to it. That's pretty much all it was. So things I wanted to add were important webinar dates, like the webinar date, the time, dates of emails needing to go out, and reminder dates, follow-up dates. So as you as registrants to this particular issue receive several emails that not only confirmed that there was registration, but our registration was filling up, but it was remind you of the time and the date, and we had follow-ups that we're going to be doing afterwards that we'll be sending you information also on, especially to get the recordings for the actual webinars. We had data like marketing requirements. What was marketing going to have to do for me? How were they going to support my effort? How did I want to capture that data? The URLs for slides and documents, I wanted to be able to provide them. I wanted to know how many people actually registered and how many attended. And afterwards, I wanted to have a lessons learned item so that we can put in things that we did right and things that we did wrong. So the idea was to be able to use this not only to track the before actions, but the after actions of this particular webinar. So I also wanted to do some task tracking because the tasks were helping me to stay on track with what needed to be completed. I wanted to go ahead and be able to schedule the webinar. I wanted to inform the staff of the dates. I wanted to send invitations. I wanted to complete the webinar, and I wanted to report on the results. So here we are. I've got all these tasks, and I'm having everything going here to be done. So before we get to questions, I'm not ready for those yet. So I'm going to back that up a little bit, and I'm going to go into my site. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to show you where I put things and how I built all of this out. So I'm going to log in as my trusty system administrator. I'm going to do a sign-in, and I'm going to walk you through this. So the first thing that I did is I went into administration, and I went into my issue types, and I created a brand new issue type for webinar. And here it is. Now, I've done a lot of this already, so you don't have to worry about me typing and making mistakes. So I figured I better get ahead and start. So here's the webinar issue type that I created. You notice it's already associated with a custom screen for webinar. So I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So we're going to come back to that in a little bit. The next thing that I said I wanted to do was to go ahead and add user-defined fields for this. So what I did, of course, is I went into System Settings after that. And then from System Settings, I went into the User-Defined Fields. If you haven't seen the User-Defined Fields, this is only accessible by system administrators. So you can't just add one because you feel like you want to. It has to be controlled by your system administrators. They can then click on Add New UDF, and they get to create a field that can be added to your Issuetrak site to gather additional data. For example, in this particular case, we have different types of fields that we can add. A text field, which is 256 characters. A large text field, 7,800 characters. A list or table-driven field. A date, a decimal. An integer field, a yes/no. And our two new ones, a hyperlink and an issue association. Now, I'll get to those later when I get into new capabilities, but in these particular cases, they're going to be crucial to what I want to do. Once you add those in, then you can add a new feature called a tooltip. So we're hitting a couple of our new capabilities already. A tooltip is really going to be a message that describes the field. We used to do this a lot by adding in screen text, where we would put a screen text to describe what we wanted. Now we can put a tooltip in there that can describe what information needs to go in there, what format we want. It's essentially a tooltip to describe what we expect this data, the information in this field to contain. We can make it private so that we can restrict access to the field. Private means that if you do not have the user permission, can view and enter information in private fields, you won't see the information. So it's a way of hiding information from other users, especially submitters. Show on search. Yes, this field can then be able to be put on the search page so it can be used without having to do the add field to search. And then, of course, you can change the width. It's nice to have a 256 character text box that looks like a 256 character text box instead of being able to have it as kind of small. And all the text in there is being hidden as you start typing it. So you can expand these particular options as you need. So I began to build these out. So some of the ones that I created in here, short title 1, short title 2, short title 3. I'm actually doing a series of short videos also to support these large videos. You'll get more of those as we start releasing them out over the year. I haven't gotten them done yet, but they'll be there soon. But they're part of this particular project. In here, let's see, in large text fields, one marketing resources needs. This one I added. So here I went ahead and added this field, which was a large text field, and you see that doesn't have quite as many options in here because you can't change the text width for one thing. So we add that in there, the webinar schedule. The webinar schedule is, again, another large text field that we wanted to put what the schedule was. Our 60-minute, 30-minute, 15-minute breakdown. Well, what is actually going to be encompassed? What topics are we going to cover during those 3 sessions? Date fields, webinar date, webinar final reminder, webinar follow-up, invites, and reminders. And then down here at the bottom, we added in the session URLs in here, all of those in here, and URLs to the different recordings and documents that we have. So we added those in also. So here we had this whole series of different information that we added in Issuetrak. Once I added in all of the fields, the next thing that I wanted to do was go to custom screens. When I went to custom screens, I went ahead and I said, okay, what am I going to use? So I looked at all the different ones that I did, and I copied out our default page down at the bottom. The default page then is built off the Issuetrak screen. I generally do not use the Issuetrak screen, and kind of Paul and I both follow this. The Issuetrak screen is very stylistic. It has a structure that's very similar to the old classic version of Issuetrak with a few niceties thrown in. But every time you add a user-defined field, it automatically adds in that user-defined field to the bottom of the form, not really where you want it. And you notice there is no edit capability. So without an edit capability, I can't change where those fields are going to lay. They're just going to lay where they land. So what I prefer to do is to go in and copy the Issuetrak screen and create a default screen. And I have a basic layout for everything else that I create from that point forward. Many times I need to move the location field up to the top. So for example, on the default layout for Issuetrak, the locations information that I like to put in with a call on the organization many times is way down here in the supporting data. So is asset information. And if you're doing some things like working with locations or working with assets, which again are optional, then it's difficult to track all the way to the bottom when you really want things at the very top. So that's why I create the default page. I build it the way I want all of them to look because I like to have consistency from one custom screen to another. So when I do a refresh, the user's not jolted with a completely different screen all the time. They have consistency. They get usage of how things flow, so they're always the same no matter what type of issue they're working with. So I created the webinar. So in here, what I did is I went ahead and did a copy. And in the copy, the included fields came over, and then I had all of my available fields listed on the left. All the available fields are not shown on the included field. I then went ahead and started examining the structure of this page, and I would start removing things that I didn't feel were relevant to this particular layout. And then I went ahead and started laying things out how I wanted them to be. For example, In here, there's a section header that I've added in here. The section header can be added by using the custom section headers option here. When you click on that, then you can type in values in here. So you're looking at typing in values, and that becomes a header for you to use. If I want to put some information on the custom form, then I can always come back in here and I can add in instructions. So you can also go in here and add in text on the form to give instructions. Please include all items that you think your marketing will be involved. Oh, by the way, it's the full rich text editor. What does that mean? Hyperlinks are on the page. Image files can be inserted. You have full formatting options, including adding tables. So you can put a lot of data in here if you want to share it with your users and share it. I went down here and I added in section headers for different sections. I added blank lines for spacing, which are added from right here. And what I came up with was a preview screen that looks a little like this. So I complete all the changes that I've made. I then start previewing the custom screen here. I go in and I start looking at my work. Okay, class is up here, status is up here, caller and location. Organization's not there. I've got assigned to. I moved it down a little bit to get it back out of the way. Can't remove it. Subject, full description, marketing resources. There's my header. There's my text. There's my field. A timeline. I put all my timelines together. I've then, of course, had another format in here. Please this format, 10 minutes for housekeeping, -- presented as person responsible. It's the format to use down here at the bottom. These are all the webinar links that I used, and it's also some of the titles that we're using. Down here at the bottom, I've got the lessons learned, task sectionality, and then severity and assets are down at the bottom. Also down at the bottom, there's a field here called Associated Quick Pick. So it's a field that's new again. It's another one of the new capabilities, but it allows you that if I submit this issue by Quick Pick, it's going to put that Quick Pick name into that field, and you'll be able to run reports off of it. Again, new capability in Issuetrak. Once I've defined that preview, and I'll go back and show you another thing. Sometimes you look at the submit page, but forget to look at the view, which is going to look like issue view, edit, the edit page, which is going to be like add note and assign, and then also the closing page. So the closing page, of course, is your closing option in here, and it gives you the close. The reason you want to look at all 4 options is because it could change view from one to the other. So always be careful with looking at those options so you can get an idea. Once you get everything like you want it, go to next. Once you click next, you're going to come to your final options for the custom screen. Requirements. Now, there are a few fields that are always required in Issuetrak, such as issue type. You've got subject, description. Information is required on submission, and information is required on close. It cannot be blank. But in these fields, I can go in and say, okay, you know what? On the webinar invites, I want to have information on to make sure the information is on the submitted, or I'll make sure that it's always there on close. So you can set options in here to have values that are going to be entered into these fields or required into these fields as you submit the issues or close the issues. However, remember, we're not doing data validation. We just say something has to be there. Make sure when you complete everything, you hit update. If you don't hit update, you are going to lose what you put in. Once you've completed the custom screen webinar, then you can click over here to assign, and you can select assign. I want to take a look at the webinar form, and I want to assign it to which issue types. And of course, in this one, it's assigned to the webinar issue type. So I don't have to go and click all the way back into issue types in order to assign it. Also, I can assign this particular webinar form to multiple issue types if I want to. As you see here, one for school transportation complaints is assigned to every one of these particular issue types. I was able to do it at one time instead of going back in and editing each one of these issues. So what does this look like? Well, What I ended up doing was my last piece, and before I submit the issue, I want to take you a look at the quick pick. You can make a decision on whether to create a quick pick or not. It's not required. You can go in, though, and you can go ahead and submit the issue just selecting the issue type. The quick pick, though, provides you with a little bit more capability. So in here, I'm going to scroll down to the operations area, and I've got a webinar quick pick that I added. The webinar quick pick then is stop here at the bottom, and then you'll see, of course, that it is restricted to the operations organization because it's only related to the operations organization. I've restricted access to it. Help desk, education, and manufacturing can't see this quick pick. I've gone ahead and filled in relevant information in here. I've even added in some information for the description to make sure that something is put in there. So the field is going to all look like this. And I've also added the tasks that I wanted. Remember those tasks that were on the process? I wanted to make sure this process was in here. The quick pick allows me to load process when I submit the issue. So that when I do go to home and I do go to submit, it's not only going to provide me with the issue template that I'm looking for, it's also going to provide me with all of the information related to the process. So here at the bottom, here's webinar, and this is what it looks like here. Bump, bump, bump. This is still loading. Now, just to show you, I'm going to get a little fancier here, and I'm going to show you what the real one looks like. Here, I'm going to go ahead and use my search and go 310. Can't get a number right. 31040. 31040. Hope I got that number right. That's 311. Oop, wrong one. I knew I was going to get this wrong. Anyway, there you go, webinar. This is what this particular webinar's control issue looks like. The one I put into the other site was built off of this. Tony submitted it. I'm assigned to it. I go ahead and give me my description, all of my marketing process, my marketing items in here. My dates are all added. My schedules are in here. All of my hyperlinks are provided in here. My lessons learned, which came over from the old site, but there's still lesson learns, and then all of my processes that I wanted to add in here, including checking off dates and things like that, and then notes added to the issue also. So that's what it looks like in operation. So I think it makes a good example of working with issues and with custom screens by going ahead and being able to gather a lot of data, and I could have put in things like attachments also to this. But it's any process you want to add, any process that you want to add in Issuetrak starts exactly the same way. Issue type, user-defined field, custom screen, do I need a quick pick? That's the way you start working with issues and notes. Okay. Again, I wanted to stop a little bit early, so it's 2:23 on my clock. We've got about 7 minutes before the final section starts. So I wanted to go ahead and say, have you got any questions? And please provide them to chat for Tony.
I've been busy fielding questions, answering them, responding to a couple of people via email offline. So trying to stay on top of it, fielding the questions. Those that had group appeal, forward them up to you, Mike, so you can go into it. I was
Okay.
just, I was busy taking notes and trying to answer stuff. And when you were doing the custom screen, after you created it, you finished doing all that, you went right into the assigning or associating the new custom screen with the issue type. And I kind of chide some of my closer customers that they need to be reading the product release notes, the new features, and I don't follow my own recommendation. I don't have enough bandwidth to read the release notes as religiously, but that was a new feature that just came out in the product. I use Issuetrak nonstop throughout my workday, and I still learn something about the product every day. So
yeah, it's funny. I've been here longer than the software's been around. So it's interesting sometimes that I'll run into things, and I did it actually prepping for this today. There was a couple of little things that caught me off guard that I didn't know. There's a lot of nuances in here, and sometimes the release notes even can miss things, or we missed it in a release note that was a long time ago, and it's something new for us. And I saw a button today that I hadn't seen in Issuetrak, and had to kind of click on it just to make sure exactly what it was going to be doing. So you can always be surprised. This is a very complex product that can work very simply if you treat it correctly. Just in understanding the capabilities, it's a powerful tool that anybody can use. But keeping up with it, especially now that we're doing a much better job of putting out releases that are relevant, throwing a couple of little features in here and a couple of little features there. The one I mentioned about the hyperlinks, I cannot tell you how long Paul and I have wanted to have that capability in the software. And that was kind of snuck up on both of us. We kind of had a release notes and whoa, it's there. And that was great having that capability in there, because now it gives us capabilities of not only linking to an existing issue, which we can do with both the hyperlink and with the associated issues capability, but also linking to issues or systems that are outside of Issuetrak. As long as it's a URL, as long as it's out there in the web, it doesn't matter what it is. We can link to it now. Great capability of working with Issuetrak with that. It's something customers have cried for years, literally.
Hey, Mike. Sorry to
Yes,
interrupt. Two things. Can you? I had a question come in, and I'm going to pose it to you. At the same time, can you navigate to the website, go to the Resources tab, and show them the recordings? I've had a couple of people ask. I've responded, but show them so they can see the navigation to get there. While you're doing that, I'll pose the question. A lady was asking about user-defined fields at the org level.
Okay, they are at the org level also.
Right. Is there any? Have you and Paul even run across much interest to expand that beyond the 3 or 5 that are there?
I think there's interest. I'm just not sure when it's going to fit into the project plan. I haven't heard anything about that. There's actually 3 other areas of user-defined fields within Issuetrak. The user-defined fields, the organizational user-defined fields, and the asset user-defined fields. I have talked to developers, and all of them say the same thing. They would love to be able to have the time to have the capabilities that we have within the issue records added to all 3 of those other areas that are in Issuetrak. I think there has to be I have to kind of put it back also on customers. We have to have some traction on user voice sometimes in order to get our development team and the product owners to say they would like to see that. But if there's an interest, please either put it into the uservoice.issuetrak.com site, and go ahead and have others go ahead and vote it up. The more votes, of course, the more it's looked at, but it is a need. There are certain capabilities. It may be a little bit trickier on the user-defined fields, because some of those are associated with the Active Directory module. So that would be maybe a little bit tricky, but I still think some of them, definitely some needs in there for us to add more fields.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt.
Until then,
Thanks,
you're
Mike.
stuck with workarounds.
Yep.
Okay.
Can you show them the resource tab, and then I got one more.
The resource tab is on the main Issuetrak site. Here is the resource drop down. You will notice right now that, of course, Help Center and Training I showed you in the last one, but I'll go there real fast, and then I'll show you the webinars. This is where we have all of our training documentation, including some training links that Paul and I have done on a PDF download. On the left-hand side is where we're storing the webinars. So when the webinars are posted out, we're putting them on this particular page now. The 3 that we did previously in December have already been posted up there, the new capabilities, the Issuetrak, administering Issuetrak, and first trainings in here. So it was users and groups and doing administrator training. Also one that Dana and Paul did on surveys has been added. This would probably be added probably within about a week. We'll have the ones for this particular session. Any of the short video webinars that I do later on will be added on this page too. So this is going to have a lot of content on it by the time we're done.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Can you navigate to CS training, if you would, and let's pull up a user profile. I had a question come in, and I was a little tongue-in-cheek in my response. That's just me. That's my sense of humor, so accept my apology. The question was, is there impact if we delete users? And my response was, ooh, stop doing that. So
yes.
Can you discuss best practice?
When you delete a user, you're deleting this user ID right here. And when you delete that user ID, it's out everywhere in Issuetrak. So let me kind of explain that first, and then we're getting ready to start the next session. But the user ID is associated with notes, associated with assets, it's associated with issues, it's associated with history, it's associated everywhere. When you delete that, you could break a link to something. You could even have it where an issue could no longer show up because it doesn't have a link to the user anymore. It's a blank record. Reporting can be thrown off, for example, because it doesn't have that associated information. And then so when you do the query, it's not, the link breaks between the user record and, say, the issue record, and it may not show that record as being valid. So the best practice is to always inactivate. Always, always, always inactivate. Never delete a user. The only time it's okay to delete a user is if they don't have any issue, if they don't have any issues associated with them and they've been very, very new. Sometimes we make a mistake, we put a user in and we just don't need it, so we'll delete it in that case. Or if it happens to be, I've done user imports to the Active Directory and they were system accounts or something like that, that's okay to delete. But standard users like this, you can really break stuff if you're not careful. So always inactivate. Another thing people have done is if they have gone ahead and deleted a user, I've seen them go ahead and re-add the user right back in using the exact same user ID. And all of a sudden, they've got issues associated with it because it brings back all that old history because the user ID has an association again. So don't do it is the best thing I can tell you about that. Always inactivate, never delete. So this little option right here, active versus non-active.